So anyway, 5 reasons why promiscuous men are more desirable. So number 2, so by definition, and this is a continuation of the last point, by definition, he must be a high-value man, okay? We keep using this term high-value man, which famously was debated by Rollo Tomassi and Sneeko and Destiny, and there was all of this sort of caveating around what it means to be a high-value man. But let's just park that for 1 minute and assume it kind of means money, muscles, game, frame. You know, he's in decent shape, he's got some money, he looks good, he probably presents himself well. Let's assume it's kind of that for the time being. If he's being promiscuous, then he is likely one of those dudes, okay? He's got a rotation, okay? He's got a rotation of women. Well, women would rather share a high-value man than they would be with somebody who is less than average, you know, less than what they want, and have him be faithful to her. Okay, that is the sad and harsh truth of the matter. Women would rather be with a guy that they regard as high value than they would be with a lesser guy who is going to be super, super faithful to them, and so on and so forth. Now, I've experienced this in my own life. You know, I mean, I was dating, I say dating, I mean very loosely. I was very loosely dating a woman a few years ago, and it was all unspoken. You know, we didn't really get into sort of any conversation about the, you know, fidelity or if we were monogamous or whatever. But I mean, clearly that was what she wanted. You know, she was this Polish woman. She was living in London. She was pretty cool. She worked for a big designer label. She was living in this quite fancy flat down near the river, and you know, we used to go over there. I used to meet up with her there and stuff. And you know, she was, for whatever reason, she must have obviously clearly been clinically insane, but she was pretty into me. You know, she really, really liked me. I didn't entirely reciprocate the feelings. I mean, I liked her. I thought she was, you know, she was cool. She was pretty hot. She was attractive. We had a good time together. But I wasn't really super invested in the whole thing, right? You know, it was kind of like, well, yeah, whatever. And as a result of that, and because I hadn't made any commitment to her, right, I'm still playing the field. And I never said that to her. You know, I didn't sit down and have this big conversation and kind of talk it through with her. But that was how it was going. And she was clearly aware of this. Okay, she was clearly aware of this. And I know that she was aware of it because a couple of times she actually caught me. I mean, there was one time that she literally saw me out with a different girl, okay? And she kind of ignored me for 2 days. She gave me the silent treatment for 2 days. She wouldn't speak to me. And then she came back online and she just asked me to, you know, and we were back on, and she asked me to come around, and it was as if nothing had ever happened. And then there was another occasion where I know she was aware that I was in contact with another girl. And again, you know, she got kind of shitty about it for a day or a day or two, but she still continued to see me, okay? And the reason for that was that she, you know, foolishly, my haters would say, but she regarded me as high value enough that she didn't want to lose me, okay? And so even though she was aware that this other stuff was happening in the background, she wasn't going to let that split us up, okay? I'm not saying it's fair. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying I'm proud of that behavior, but that's the reality of how it was. And one of the interesting things that you'll find is that the less concerned you are about appeasing her, or about, you know, oh my God, I got to be so careful. I can't do anything wrong because otherwise she's just going to leave me and she's going to hate me. You know, she's never going to speak to me or sleep with me again. The more concerned you are with that, the more likely that is to happen. Whereas, quite frankly, if you don't really give much of a damn and you're just kind of doing your own thing and keeping it super casual on your end, that's when these women tend to hang around and they tend to stay. and they tend to just cling to you even more. Okay, it's really fucking strange. It's really counterintuitive. I mean, Pearl, I was talking to Pearl yesterday. She did a tweet yesterday where she said something along the lines of, having interviewed thousands of women, I've come to the sad conclusion that the best way to keep a woman faithful to you is to cheat on her. Which, again, it's one of those things, if you looked at that at face value without having any knowledge of any of this stuff or any experience around dating or this kind of area, you would think was completely nonsense. You would think that's completely counterintuitive, because how can cheating on a woman possibly, on what planet can that make her want to hang around? But that was Pearl's observation. And, you know, we were talking about it afterwards, and certainly I'm aware of examples of where the guy has cheated and he's owned the fact that he's cheated, and then the woman has maybe been angry for a few days, maybe she's gone offline for a few days, but then she's come back. And I think this is the key. And I'm not condoning cheating here. I'm not saying you should go out and cheat or anything like that. I think if you make a promise to somebody, you make a commitment to somebody, you should stand by that, because that's the right fucking thing to do. But you need to be aware of these dynamics, okay? And that, and sorry, just to add to that, just to emphasize, that is if you've made that promise. That is if you've made that commitment. If you don't make that commitment, right, and, you know, when you're entering into the relationship, when you're casually dating, if you haven't had a conversation, you haven't made that commitment. So really, at that point, all's fair in love and war, right? Because she's probably dating around as well. So you can do the same thing until you guys have sat down and it's been made clear that, okay, right, this is exclusive, these are the ground rules. If that happens, then, okay, that's a slightly different territory. But if you avoid that, then really it's kind of open season. But, you know, at the same time, you have to be aware that she might be doing her own thing as well, which maybe you're not happy with. But whatever. I mean, the point is that this thing about the high value man paradox is just so crazy. But and this is why a lot of these the incel accounts, or the guys who are, you know, they're not getting action, they're not getting success in this area, they get so angry about this, because they would see it very logically and say, well, look, that's ridiculous. What should be happening is that women should be dating at their own level. Okay, so if she's an 8, she dates an 8. If she's a 6, she dates a 6. If she's a 3, she dates a 3. And of course, what we're seeing happening now with the dating apps is that women are quite easily able to access dudes who are higher than them on the totem pole and probably have sex with those guys. Because guys, as we know, often a bit less discriminating. You know, he might be a Chad, but, you know, there's a little bit of a dry spell, or his girlfriend's just dumped him and he's like, okay, I'll get Sheila over, you know, she's only a 5 or whatever, but, you know, it'll be fun for the evening. Now, of course, then the question is, well, would he actually wife her up? Would he engage with her over the longer term? Probably not. That's another question. But in terms of who's getting the sexual access, as we know, it is this top percentile of guys. And women would rather share one of those guys than they would go with somebody who they regard as being lesser, okay? And for that reason, a guy who is promiscuous and who therefore is, by definition, inherently one of the more attractive guys, women are going to rather share him, regardless of his promiscuity, regardless of his philandering conduct, than she would be with a lesser man who may be faithful, okay? And here's the other thing, right? You've got to ask the question, is faithfulness actually a virtue? Fidelity in relationships, is it actually a virtue? Or is it just something that's born out of necessity, okay? So if you are a guy who is... And listen, I know people, I hate the numbering system. I know people hate the numbering system. Even my mother said to me, the only thing I don't like about what you guys talk about is when you're numbering people, because you're treating them, you know, and I do agree, I get it. But for shorthand, let's carry on doing it anyway. If you are a dude who is, you know, of a lower tier, say you're a 3 or a 4 or whatever, you know, you're not up there with the Chads, okay? Then firstly, it's going to be easier for you to be faithful, because you're going to have less options. And secondly, you've got less options, so it's going to be harder for you to cheat. So in a sense, and then you can wrap it up in a nice bow and say, well, I'm so virtuous because I'm this monogamous guy and I would never go behind her back. But if you haven't got the option to go behind her back anyway, then what does that really mean? It's kind of meaningless, isn't it, right? So again, the guys who have the ability to be promiscuous, they are the more attractive guys. And women in the current dating marketplace, because they are no longer beholden to men financially, because there is much less pressure early on, at least, to get married and to settle down, and there is a sort of you go girl kind of culture out there which would encourage women to pursue sexual pleasure and sexual fulfillment above other things, then they're going to be going for those top guys, and they don't really give a damn if he's fucking around behind her back or not.